Hi kids, it's Toni. So I got a new video camera and it's kind of a handheld little thingy. And I'm by myself doing this video, so it's going to be a little interesting as far as camera angles are concerned. But today I'm going to do a little tutorial on how to make nut milk. So I'm going to do hazelnut milk. So you can see the hazelnuts right there. And in a second I'll flip this around so I can actually see what I'm doing when I point the camera toward what I'm doing. I do apologize. So yes, it's very easy to make nut milks. Now, why would you want to use a nut milk or even make one for that matter? Number one, it's always best to make something yourself. That way you know what's in it. It doesn't have any extra stuff in it, no preservatives, blah blah blah, extra sugars added, extra salts. And it's gratifying to make something yourself, and it tastes better because the love is in there. But the number two reason is because this is a really good replacement for people who might be lactose intolerant or just intolerant of whatever regarding milk or dairy products. And it's a great substitute for milk, and if you like to have cereal in the morning or you want to have some type of creamy coffee or tea. So this is a really good one, and I chose hazelnut specifically for that because a lot of people like their hazelnut coffee or the hazelnut flavoring, and this is the natural flavoring without the syrups and the extra sugars and stuff like that. So you get the creaminess and the hazelnuttiness without the crappiness. And that's a technical term, by the way. And so yeah, and also because soy milk, and some of you may already know this, but soy in general is not necessarily the best thing for the human body. It's not generally good for human consumption. It's intended for animals that have more than one stomach. We don't have that. Unless you're going to have something that's fermented, like tempeh or miso, I would strongly suggest avoiding soy. So nut milks are a really good way to go. Almond milk, hazelnut milk, hemp milk is a really good one. It's also complete protein, which is good stuff right there. So, okay, I'm going to start the tutorial. So I'm going to flip the camera around so I can see what I'm doing from the other side. And again, I apologize if it looks a little weird, but I'm by myself today. And so here it goes. So flipping it around. Here we go. So here is my blender and my jam-packed corner of the kitchen here. This is actually my kitchen. I love it. It's kind of basic, and that was a really quick shot of it, but anyway. Okay, so I have about a cup of hazelnuts in the blender, and what I'm going to do, I wonder if I can actually set this up for a second while I'm doing this, so you can see what I'm doing right here. So I've got a cup of hazelnuts in here, and I'm going to add just enough water to cover the hazelnuts and start to masticate them. So I am using tap water, yes, but I have well water and it's tested every year and it's absolutely perfect. So if you're going to do this, I strongly suggest using purified water, spring water, something like that. Okay, so I'm going to cover the hazelnuts with water, and I'm going to chop them up as much as possible. And may not need to add some water as I go along because it's going to start to get thick. And we really want to grind up the nuts. We really want to grind up the nuts enough so that we get as much of the flavor and the pulp out of them as possible. Okay, so it's going to be noisy for a second. Thicken, yeah. Add some water. So while that's chopping up, I'm going to tell you about some other things that you're going to need to make this work out. You are going to need some type of bowl to put your pulp in. A fine mesh strainer or cheesecloth. I don't happen to have cheesecloth. I love this thing. And another bowl to catch the juice after you strain it. It's technically a nut juice, not a nut milk, but it looks like milk, tastes like milk, but it's a juice. And the consistency is looking pretty good. So it's kind of like, I don't know, what would you say? Wallpaper paste, but a little chunkier. So now we can add the rest of the water. I would guesstimate that I've had about 1.5 to 2 cups of water in there already. So I'm going to add, let's see, set this up again. I'm going to add, I'm going to say about 2 more cups of water. So ultimately, and it also depends on how creamy you want this. If you want a thinner milk, you use fewer nuts or more water, or vice versa, you use more nuts and less water for a really good cream. But generally I do about 1 cup of hazelnuts and 3 to 4 cups of water, and that makes a kind of middle of the road nice cream. That's probably a little bit much for a cereal, but it's great for a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. So I'm going to fill it up to about 2 more cups, And I'm going to run it again for a second just to mix everything through. Alright, now comes the cool part. I have my fine mesh strainer and a bowl large enough to catch what's going on here. So I wonder if you can see what's going on. So I'm just going to pour the nut milk through the strainer